hashtag NeverAlone podcast. We'll be talking about depression. So depression is probably something that most people have some sort of experience with, as 1 in 7 Australians will actually experience it throughout their lifetime. At the moment, we have 1 in 16 females experiencing it, and 1 in 19 males. So obviously females are probably more susceptible to this mental health illness. And we are also going to delve into how it's not just a thing that can affect us mentally, but if we are suffering from depression, how it can also affect us in the physical sense. So we are going to jump in with our first guest, who is Nonie Carr. She is a counselling psychologist, and then we'll have a chat with Paul, who is our lived experienced speaker. We have our first guest, Nonie, here with us. She is a counselling psychologist, so we're going to find out a bit more about what she actually does and her professional experience with depression. Thank you so much for being here today. So I guess first thing I wanted to delve into, I guess, is if you could just explain to us what counselling psychology is.
Okay, so counselling psychology is a stream of psychology. So all psychologists do an undergraduate and a postgraduate, and I've done a master's in counselling psychology. And this means that just like all psychologists, we are trained to assess, diagnose and treat mental health disorders.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what my training is. And I've been working for over 10 years as a psychologist in schools with adolescents and in private practice.
Okay, so you deal with both like teenagers and with adults as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Is I mean, with depression, we spoke at the start about the stats. So it is quite a high rate of Australians that are experiencing this mental health issue. Would you say that, like in your experience, that you are finding that would be the majority of cases that you deal with, or?
I think it's probably a bit of an even split between anxiety and depression.
Okay.
And it's not uncommon for anxiety and depression to co-occur.
Yep.
So it differs depending on whether anxiety comes first or depression comes first, but it's not uncommon for them to be what we call comorbid.
Okay, no worries. So I mean, anxiety was the first episode that we did, so it's nice to have a bit of a follow through.
Yeah.
So with depression, we heard about like lived experience. I mean, from a medical perspective, can you kind of break down what someone may be experiencing when they are going through depression or having depression?
Okay, so we look at depression from a number of different perspectives. So there's the Diagnostic Criteria, which is when I have someone come to me and they're talking about feeling pretty low and flat or sad a lot, or what most people refer to as depressed.
Yeah.
And then I look at the Diagnostic Criteria, and that might be, the first one is, have you been feeling sad for 2 weeks or more? For most of the time. So it's not just feeling sad yesterday, I'm depressed. It's feeling sad for 2 weeks or more most of the time.
Okay, so 2 to 3 weeks is what you're saying.
At least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it can be longer.
Yes, of course. I think a lot of people, it would be nice if it was kind of like a 2-week period.
Absolutely.
And you're like, well, done with that.
Yes.
That was dark, but get out of that.
So that's the first one.
Okay.
And then we might look at whether someone's sleep patterns have changed. So
Okay.
they might be sleeping more than normal or less than normal. So they're just tired all the time and they're sleeping all the time. Or maybe they just can't sleep. They're really tired, but they just can't get to sleep. They might have had a change in their diet. So sometimes people will eat more, so it's a comfort eating stuff. Or they just don't feel hungry, so they just don't eat. So they might have lost a lot of weight.
Okay.
Then we might look at, well, are you actually still seeing your friends and family? Are you socially withdrawing? So that if people are kind of withdrawing from their social networks, their family, then that's often a problem with depression. The other thing is, if they're actually not doing the things that they would usually enjoy, so it's not just social interaction. If they really love painting and they're just not painting anymore, they're not enjoying it, or maybe they're really physically active and they're just not doing it anymore, not going to the gym, or they're not going for a run or whatever it is. So whatever you really enjoy, if you've stopped doing that
Mhm.
and you're not enjoying it anymore,
Mhm.
that's a problem with depression.
Okay.
There's also, we might look at motivation level.
Mhm.
So just don't feel like doing anything.
I was just thinking, like, with the not painting or being
Yeah.
Active and stuff,
Yeah.
kind of like lethargic. Kind of
Yeah.
like,
So you
what's
just
the
can't-
point in
exactly
doing it?
can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Wake up in the morning, can't be bothered, and that comes into that self-care.
Mhm.
What's the point of getting up and having a shower if I'm just going to sit at home all day?
Mhm.
Can't be bothered. It's too hard
Mhm.
to even have a shower for some people, and so
Yeah.
they might go days without a shower because they're feeling so awful.
Mhm.
So that's when that depression is really, really quite problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely. When you kind of like hold up, you know, even opening up the blinds and
Mhm.
seeing outside and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's also sex drive.
Mhm.
Sex drive just dies. You just don't feel like it. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's about that closeness with your intimate partner, and sometimes it's about the energy level, at the motivation level, and
Lack of
sometimes-
enjoyment with activities that
absolutely.
you used to
Yeah,
like.
yeah. And it's also just the change in hormones.
Yeah.
So the hormones change.
Yeah. So, I mean, with those symptoms that people are displaying, you know, it's a lot of behavioural
Mhm.
things. But with the sadness, you know, there's a lot of subconscious sort of things. Like people may stop seeing their friends, and you know, kind of their sleeping patterns are changing, but they're not feeling sad.
Yep.
Do you find that that's something that people present with?
So they might not feel sad, but they just feel kind of flat and
Yeah.
nothing.
Okay.
And so
Like
the other
apathetic to stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the other part is that cognitive side, so how we think.
Mhm.
So there's the feeling of hopelessness.
Mhm.
So I just don't feel like anything can get better or will get better.
Mhm.
And that feeling of helplessness. No one can help me. I can't help being like this. And that can be quite difficult to pull yourself out of at times.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, me personally would say that I've experienced that spiral, and it can kind of be triggered by a whole bunch of things for me. But yeah, it's definitely that no one understands. You know, I couldn't explain it to them, or you know, I don't want to hurt them even. Like if you,
Yep.
I remember having like a really tough conversation with my mum and having to like, you know, and she was just very adamant, like, no, you don't feel that way. You know, you surely you wouldn't feel that way because you'd hurt me. You know, and it's like that's not really where your mind is. Like you want to protect people, but you're also like so caught up in your own thoughts.
Yeah. And so that's where that social withdrawal comes in.
Yeah.
So it's that I don't want to be a burden to other people.
Yeah.
They're not going to believe me. They're not going to understand. So I won't put myself out there.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation and rather not have it. Like I'd rather not do anything right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just keep going kind
And
of
then-
further down.
And that's where the anxiety can come in for people. It's that cycle of thinking, I'm not worth it. If I go, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? What are they going to... So that social stuff
Yeah.
is around that anxiety, and that's a very... anxiety is a very cognitive
Yes.
experience. It's how you think, and then that affects how you feel.
Yes.
So this is where this interaction between anxiety and depression comes in sometimes.
Okay, so I mean, if we left the conversation where it's at now, it's kind of like, great, well, if you have depression, that's unfortunate for you, because it sounds like a very hard place to get out of, but we know that it's not impossible, and that's why we've obviously got professionals like yourself that are, you know, here to be able to start going through that healing process. So, you know, if we use me as a hypothetical or client A, you know, if they come to you and you've gone through that diagnostic process and you're like, well, you know, you are suffering from anxiety and depression, where do you go from that? Because you know, when you get a diagnosis, it's not always as great. I'm fixed now that we know what it's called.
Oh, a diagnosis isn't a cure.
No.
And one of the things the first things I do is actually validate how they're feeling.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know, you're feeling awful, you're feeling bad, your self-esteem has taken a dive, you don't feel confident in yourself, you don't want to see people, you don't want to do anything, you feel embarrassed about not having energy to have a shower or even prepare a meal.
Yeah, or you feel bad that you've got a mental health issue and you know, it's
absolutely.
embarrassing enough to have that sort of thing
Absolutely.
happening.
So then it's about that validation of this is not okay, but it's that awesome that you've come to ask for help.
Yeah.
And then it's about understanding what might have contributed to them getting to this point.
Yes.
And sometimes it's a pattern of thinking that they've had for a long time, and this is just a low period for them. It might be that there's been some grief or loss. Their favourite, their pet they've had for years might have died. Or maybe they've lost someone, or a relationship breakdown, a job breakdown, or a friendship has broken down. Or maybe there's no real reason and they're just feeling kind of shit. So trying to work out that. And then it might be trying to tease out the thoughts that they're having and maybe what they'd like things to look like.
Sure. I mean, I'm a big believer. I've been working on my vision boards for 2020 over the last couple of days because I guess through my own journey of trying to correct these type of thoughts, it's not looking at the hopelessness and things that you can't achieve. It's like, all right, we'll focus on something that actually does motivate you. You've got to try and turn the page and redirect those thoughts into a positive way, like with an electrical current.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about that finding what you'd like life to look like. And sometimes I just feel stuck. I don't know. And so sometimes it's finding little things. And sometimes I start with that behavioural approach of how about we just aim to have a shower. That's it. Every day, just aim to have a shower.
Sometimes that's my biggest goal, to be honest with you.
And some people, it's like, I've had a shower and I'm going to get back into bed, but I'm not going to put clean pyjamas on this time. I'm going to put my pyjamas on that I've been wearing for 5 days, and put them to the wash, and put clean pyjamas on and go back to bed. I actually feel better. And sometimes it's about that taking one tiny little step. And you might then take 2 steps backwards, but it's actually, that was okay. I could maybe do that again tomorrow. And then finding something else in their life that might help them. So if they've got a dog.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, if you had a pet, go out for a walk, even if it's a 5-minute walk, just around the block, walk down the street and back up. Like, I know that it's just, like, I got excited about seeing a red, blue and yellow car all together. And then on the other side of the street, it was like a blue, red and orange car and then a green one. I was like, oh, look at all the colours. And it's just little things like that I'm just like, okay, it made me smile. Good,
So it's finding those little things. And sometimes it is about tapping into their interests and saying, well, what do you usually enjoy? What might you like to do? And how about you try and do that for just 5 minutes and then see what happens.
Yeah, I kind of see it as like a little kid with trying new foods. Just a little mouthful and just see how you go. You can spit it out if you don't like it, but you might love it and you don't know.
And I think it's the same with anything. If you're struggling with motivation, you set yourself a goal of doing it for just 5 minutes and then reassess. Oh, I've actually got this far. May as well keep going for another 5. Don't say, I'll go for another hour.
Yeah, set realistic expectations on yourself as well as the little goals. Yeah, I use my reminders a lot in my phone as well. And it could just be like my gran needs something mailed. Go and take the letters up the street to the post office, and it's just like, cool, did that. So, and then it, like you said, it kind of does build up that motivation again. It's kind of like if you're really at the bottom of a tank, just fill it up slowly.
Yeah, and so we might also then look at their thoughts. So what's going on in their thoughts, and what we know about our thoughts, we can't control them. They come unbidden. We don't like them. They're unpleasant, they're challenging, and we'd like them to go away. They're not helpful in the moment. So sometimes it's about going, okay, well, you're having this thought. What's the emotion that thought has then presented for you? And what's the behaviour that you're usually doing? Is that a helpful behaviour? Or do you then end up in a spiral or spiralling down into feeling worse? So then what if we put that thought to one side and we shift our attention to something that we're experiencing as pleasant? So that's that approach of mindfulness. And I often use mindfulness with my clients, whether it's anxiety or depression or confidence or self-esteem or performance or anything. Mindfulness is so helpful. And I take that acceptance commitment therapy approach. and, well, here's a thought. You can give it all of your attention and it can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Or you can allow it to sit just over there and then shift your attention to this, and this is where your attention is then. This thought will keep tapping you on the shoulder and going, what about me?
Yeah.
And you can go, I think I'm going to shift my attention back here.
Yeah, and I think that, if you kind of think of it like a metaphor of a child that's throwing a tantrum, how many times have you seen a parent just walk away from that child on the ground? Because it's not going to get any better with the attention. You just got to diffuse. And then, like, I had a sad situation the other day where I came across a cat in the middle of the road. I tried to save it, and then it was just, I kept thinking of that happening to my cats, and I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm going down a bad path today. Like, this has really stuck me on a bad path for the rest of the day. And so I went outside and I just sat in the sun and looked at the vegetables and took some photos of my mum's dog with the garden hose, and it was just completely different mood all of a sudden. Totally. And it's not like that, those thoughts still come up like a week later, but it's just, that's just not what I'm choosing to focus on. Yeah,
and you can notice that that's a really unhelpful and unpleasant thought process, and you can notice that it's there, and you can accept that it's there. You don't have to like it, but it's there, and then you shift your attention to a more helpful thought process.
So I think that that's quite similar to what our last guest, Ian, was saying in the last podcast in regards to anxiety, where same with the thoughts. They are going to be there. They bounce around in your head and you don't have a lot of control over it, but being in the control that we do have, use that to focus on something positive, even if it's this much positive.
And this is where mindfulness training or meditation can be incredibly useful, because it allows us to train our attention, and that's all it is. It's training our attention, and it's not about focusing on nothing. We're actually choosing a focus for our attention. And so when I work with clients and I'm teaching them about mindfulness, the very first thing I talk to them about is breathing. Let's just focus on our breath. And when you notice those thoughts coming in, and that thought might be, I can hear the clock ticking, or what am I going to do for dinner, or this is really uncomfortable, or I've got an itch, or my heart's racing.
Yeah.
It's constantly shifting your attention back to that thought. And it's okay, because we will be distracted. It's just bringing it back.
Yeah.
And that constant bringing back our attention from that distraction to where we want to focus is that training in mindfulness and meditation. And so when we have those difficult thoughts or experiences, we can more easily shift our attention.
It's just training the brain, I guess, and strengthening that part where we get to decide where we are paying our attention. So mindfulness isn't some sort of hippy-dippy buzzword that we're using now. It is so important. It's a key aspect to us being able to gain as much control as possible over our thought spirals and being able to choose the path that we go down. So I guess the last question that I just want to get from your perspective for our viewers is that if we're talking about the small thing that we can do, and that acknowledging help is the first step to getting help, or admitting that you've got a problem. We're not in a 12-step program here, but if we're using these kind of words, what would you say your number one piece of advice would be for someone who's in that spiral right now? If they're being like, oh my God, I completely understand everything that Nonie is saying. How do I get to someone like yourself?
I think the first step is to just go, wow, this is kind of shit, and I'm out of control. In terms of I can't manage these thoughts. It's going down a path which is really unhelpful and that's unpleasant and I don't like. It is about finding someone who you can say, I'm struggling, and say, I need help. And this goes right back to that hashtag NeverAlone. We all have people in our lives, whether we recognise them as someone we're really close to, or if it's someone that we know who might be able to say, yeah, okay, that kind of sucks. What would you like me to do to help?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's knowing that, if you're the person who someone's coming to, it's like, they don't know what you want to help. But maybe it's just sitting there and saying, I'm here, you're never alone, I'm here, I'll make you a cup of tea and we'll just sit here. And it's that, Winnie the Pooh, A.A. Milne has some wonderful little cartoons, and it's that idea of Pooh just going and sitting with Piglet or Eeyore.
Yeah, it's
going,
that one where it's just
Yeah,
them sitting
just-
down on a log or something. And
Yeah,
it's just
what are
like,
you
I'm
doing?
here for you, friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
just here.
Yeah.
And maybe it's about, I'm going to, you need some help. Would you like me to call the GP for you?
Yeah, that's what
Would
I was
you like
thinking.
me to
Like,
make an appointment?
once you kind of make that
Mhm.
connection or that kind of safe place with another person, it's like that little bit of moral support to say, okay, like, may not be physically holding hands, but I know that my mum goes to the psychologist with my grandma, and we'll sit in the actual session for when it's appropriate and when it's not, just to make it easier for my gran to kind of go down that path of
And
talking to someone.
And maybe it's about going to the GP appointment but sitting in the waiting room. Or maybe they go into the appointment with you, or maybe you give them a lift to see the psychologist and you sit in the waiting room. And even that's really helpful as a psychologist. We can say, okay, you've got someone who's actually supporting you there. They love you enough to say you need help. And with adolescents, when I worked in a school for a significant period of time, I had kids come and say, my friend's really stressed. She doesn't want me to tell you, she's cutting or something. I'm like, actually, you've done the right thing, because it's about care and love for your friend. And if they had a go at you about it, say, no, it was because I care, because I love you and I want you to be okay.
Okay, cool. So, just to recap, have a conversation. If you are seriously at the bottom of that spiral and you feel like there's nothing that you can possibly do, just reach out to someone and attempt to have a conversation. And I pretty much guarantee that when you're in that dark of a place, there's not many people that would say, I don't care about what you're going through. I think everyone, has been in a dark place, I think, and if you haven't, are you a human? But then the other thing I do want to, I was drawing on a little bit, but I do want to just touch on, you mentioned with teenagers, it's not just a teenage thing, it is an adult thing,
absolutely.
the self-harm aspect and where that kind of goes to suicide. So is that, if we're just touching on that, if there's like a really dire situation or like you're aware that you've got a friend.
So I wanted to clarify, suicide and self-harm are different things.
Yes,
and suicide doesn't lead to, self-harm doesn't lead to depression.
Yep.
So self-harm doesn't lead to suicide.
Yes.
Self-harm is a coping mechanism. And the unfortunate thing is, it works. It works for what it's used for. It's about, if someone's self-harming, it's really about seeking help or helping them seek help so that they can find alternative coping strategies that might actually be more helpful and might actually be more appropriate than hurting themselves.
Of course, because in my experience, you're already hurting yourself enough, and it was that kind of way to signal with my brain that what I'm experiencing in here was coming out in a physical manifestation, and it made more sense to me that way. But that's definitely not the way to deal with anything. So if you identify that a friend or something, it is really important to be able to get onto that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
tell someone, get them to.
What about if people are like, I don't want my friend to be angry with me,
It is that thing of, well, actually, it's about caring.
Their safety comes above everything else.
Absolutely. And that's why when it comes to working with adolescents, if a child or even an adult is at risk, then we want to disclose that to somebody. And I generally, with adolescents, I say, who can I tell? I need to tell somebody. I think I should tell your parents. Is that okay? And even if they say no, it's like, I kind of have to, because they're responsible for you when you leave my office. With adults, I would probably tell their GP. If they've come with a referral, I would probably ask if I can tell a partner or a friend or a parent or a child if they've got older children. like adult children.
Yep.
But again, and the same with suicide. If someone's that process of getting to that point of feeling suicidal, it feels like there's no other option. And the depression is so bad.
Or just overwhelming.
Oh yeah. But the other thing is, in order to get to that point of actually doing something, then you actually need to have some sort of energy. And if you're that depressed, you're not motivated, you don't have the energy level, and you're too tired and it's too hard. So that really, there's that little risk area of when you started getting help, and then you start feeling more energetic.
And then you kind of backslide a bit.
Yep. And so it's always really helpful to have someone on your team.
Okay.
To have someone there. And I do a little bit of, so I'm a cyclist, I cycle, and for me, exercise is so good for mental health. And I ride with a group, the Knights of Suburbia, and their hashtag is NeverAlone. And they do a lot of work with the Love Me, Love You Foundation, which was started by Lance Pacini, who was an ex-footballer. And his thing is, you've got if you can name 5 people in your life who are your support people, let them know that they're your support people, and I'm sure you're their support person at some point. So everyone hopefully can name 5 people, and one of those 5 people might be your GP, might be your psychologist, it might be your dog, but there's going to be someone who you can tell, and that's really helpful.
Okay, great. I think that is some amazing advice, being able to, I guess, understand, from the first step of being able to speak to a professional. So, definitely there are people like Nonie out there that, are completely understanding of what you may be going through, and there's definitely ways that you can be able to overcome it. So it's not a diagnosis and, it's terminal. It's definitely something that people can recover from, and I'm glad to, we didn't end our conversation at the negative bit. We've gone through and we've mindfully changed our direction, and we've ended up positive here.
Yes.
So with that being said, we will bring our next guest on. Hi Paul, thank you so much for joining us on your couch today.
No problem, nice to meet you.
Glad that you've cleared your schedule for us.
I didn't have a schedule.
Yeah. So we are here to talk about, or for you to tell us a bit about your experience with depression. So I guess the first question would be, how did the word depression even come into your life?
Look, in retrospect, looking back on my life, which isn't all that long really, I'm not that old, but looking back at it, I think I might have always been susceptible to a bit of depression. I always seem to sort of look at things glass half empty side of things, which over the years I've trained my mind to actually overcome that and think only positively, which has been a big help. But depression, when I was growing up and I suppose into my life, I really never heard of it. I think I had a girlfriend once that said, "Oh, I'm really depressed," and I thought, "What are you on about?"
You're so dramatic. What are you
talking
about?
Yeah,
Shut up.
Dramatic. I didn't actually fully understand. It wasn't that well known. No one said, depression was. Whereas now it's really, right out in the open. There's lots of good people like yourself,
Well, and you too, joining us. I mean, it takes a very brave person to speak about it, which is what we're talking about with Nonie, that you kind of go, "I'm depressed," and you shut up and you don't talk about it,
that's right. Whereas now, look, it's not a stigma anymore. In fact, I'm sort of I'm happy to say it, because then I can maybe get someone out of there. I'm counselling my children. I just talk to anyone really.
You put your oxygen mask on first, and you're like, "Cool, who else needs to breathe around here? I got the masks."
I know what you're talking about.
So you want to help spread that wisdom a bit.
So the short answer is about 20 years ago. I had a series of events in my life that seemed like everything was going really badly for me, and I just didn't want to get out of bed. I was always a very motivated person. Like, you know, in sport, in anything I do, I was like, 100% go for it. And I just crashed. Didn't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Didn't realise why.
So there was a period of time with the behavioural changes, and then like what Nonie and I were speaking about with that whole like diagnosis, like there was a period of time before you realised like, oh shit, I should be actually wanting to get out of bed. Like this isn't normal for me.
Yeah, but I didn't really want to get better. I actually liked having my little cocoon and sort of getting on.
You get comfy in your discomfort sort of thing. You're like, if I'm going to be in this bed, I may as well make it a place I want to be.
Because I wanted to be there for a long time. I didn't want to get out of bed. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that was what Nonie and I talked like, where you get that spiral, or like rock bottom almost. Maybe a couple of centimeters off rock bottom, but you're pretty low. So the story obviously didn't end there. What was that real driving force that woke you up to the situation and made you actually want to get out of bed?
Look, I suppose just talking about it, really.
Yeah.
I remember going to my local, community sort of psychologist, or whatever they are, I'm not sure. But and that's when the sort of it hit me, like the penny dropped. I need to just change what I'm thinking. Get on some probably good meds and just surround myself with good people to talk to.
Yeah, okay.
And got me back out,
Yeah. Was, the process easy for you to, did you go and speak to an actual psychologist and, get the prescription from them, or was it a GP conversation?
It was very easy at the time. The facilities were there, it was all very good. But the thing is, I expected it to be a fix where, now I'm okay now, am I? And that's not the case.
Yeah.
It just goes up and down, sort of, and you need to manually, when you're getting into those downward curves, you've got to manually snap yourself out of it straight away, because you don't want it to manifest. And
you know what the other half of the side is.
Before,
Yeah, and then for me personally, I know that I've had some really dark. Oh, okay, thank you. I've had some very dark places that I've been in, and I kind of sit around and go, oh, well, I'm not there anymore. That's the old me, and my mum's kind of like, I think there might be some stuff you need to talk about that it's not really that obvious sometimes, or your brain doesn't want to. Our brains are very clever, so obviously they don't want you to acknowledge that you've got a problem, because then it means that you have to do all this stuff and it's going to be so hard to change, where it's easier just to sit in your little funk.
That's
sometimes
right.
It looks like the mountain's like this and you're in bed here, so
I know she's talking about your mum and all that, but I didn't have I had my wife, I suppose. Not I suppose. She was actually what really, she's always been my counsellor. So, and
that's
my person I always go straight to if I've got a problem. But men generally don't talk much, about, it's, it's got that stigma to it.
There is that kind of societal way that we see a heterosexual couple that, the man is stoic and doesn't like to talk about his feelings, and you've got the wife like, you're acting different, what's wrong with you? Talk to me, rah rah. And then, they kind of crack the shell open. Because I know that with my dad, it's very much internalizing, these are my problems, no one else can help me with them, I'm not going to burden other people with what I'm going through. And that's not even in a depressive way, if it's business or life or whatever, he's just I just got to deal with it myself. And I think that in society we're kind of driven to be very self-sufficient, independent, get up and on with it sort of thing. So, you kind of have to put on that mask and be like, I've got this. So, in conjunction with your wife and the community centre psychologist that you...
And meds, I suppose, as well, and exercise, I was trying to do all the right things.
Yeah.
And, diet's important. And,
definitely. What was your experience with the medication?
I sort of bumped around from one to the other. I can't even remember half the ones, but I finally found the right one for me, I think. And and it might not be anything, someone going to get meds now, but the fact is that it is a bit hit and miss.
Yes. Yeah.
And some work, some don't for some people, but I suppose with your GP's help, you just find the right one.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like with everything, like you find the right one. I mean, with my health issues and, you know, finding psychologists and stuff like that, you feel like a bit of a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Putting yourself through this, and, you know, maybe a medication doesn't agree with you, and then, you know, that might be a little bit of a flare up of the situation and increase your depression because you think, oh, well, I've actually tried something and now it's not working for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there anything in particular that you really utilize? Like, if anyone's kind of going through that process where these meds are making them tired, these meds are making them feel that way, is there something that you kind of be like,
especially initially when people take meds, like a lot of them have some bad side effects, and some of them can actually exacerbate the problem as well. So it's good to have someone who's actually that you can talk to regularly about how you're feeling, especially in the first few weeks. But after a while, you just it becomes part of, you know, you find the right one for you, and you've got to use everything in your toolbox to sort of keep yourself thinking positively and happy and, you know, happy thoughts. Yeah.
So that mindfulness, because I mean, like, you know, when you're depressed and nothing's working out for you, when you're like, think happy thoughts, you're like, I'm going to punch you in the face. Like, you're just like, you don't understand, like, happy thoughts don't exist for me.
Yeah.
So, like, was mindfulness one of the techniques that you used, or, you know, internet cat videos? Like, what was your kind of go-to for redirecting the thoughts?
I suppose family, you know, like, you know, you sort of bounce back. You can sort of see when you're talking to your kids, if you sort of understand they're a mirror of you, and they can see if you're not feeling well, they can tell, and then, you know, my go-to, good point, good question. I suppose a bit of, you know, meditation as well. Yeah. And
Yeah. So, I mean, if you are, you know, in a position where you're lucky enough to have a family around you as your support system, I mean, even, you know, siblings, or, you know, a younger niece or something,
that's
like,
friends.
Yeah.
It's just anyone that's around you that's close enough to you. It doesn't have to be your family. Some people
it could be, but, you know, it's just those little things, like, you know, if I know that my friends are going through a bit of a tough time, from the other side of things, just send them a little text thinking about you.
Yeah.
You know, it's really just that little kind of bit of human contact that helps you, you know, kind of bring yourself out of that spiral.
And people listening to this, probably they might also be like what we call time, you know, depressive people.
Yeah.
In other words, if people have the skills out there, they can actually know to text their friend, text their family member, and make sure they're always, you know, okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have Are You OK Day, and obviously from the other side, you know how important it is to have someone that's asking you, are you okay, okay? Because we can kind of get stuck in our own, you know, rut a little bit, and I'm fine, you know, because you keep you're in that position of telling yourself that you're fine because you're trying to work through everything else. So that's just the default answer that you start giving to everyone.
Exactly.
So, you mentioned diet and, like, fitness, like actually working on your physical health.
It releases endorphins or whatever it is, serotonin, makes you just feel really good about yourself, and, you know, you're heading in the right direction. But a lot of people don't have time, they say these days, but, you know, it's a matter of making time, I think.
It definitely is. I mean, my depression would definitely come from a place of my chronic pain. And having both of those things, it is very important to be positive in less stressful environments, to be eating well, to be, you know, try to exercise and be physical as much as possible.
They're all, you got to think, I suppose, holistically, there's that word, I don't know.
Yeah.
But mind, body and soul, you know.
Yeah, so again, throwing out another word, like mindfulness and holisticness are not hippie weird words, like they're actually like what we should really start using within our vocabulary when we talk about self-care and how we're actually making sure that everything is functioning properly, because it really all just feeds together. So, I mean, we talk a lot about a journey and that everyone is on their own journey. So if you say that it kind of started 20 years ago, where do you kind of feel like you're at now? Like you said, you're a much more positive person than when you started off.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good now. I don't think I really, you know, I think I've overcome a lot in my life, and I think whatever if I have a problem, it's nothing compared to the problems that I've had in the past.
Yes.
So everything becomes much easier as you go along
Mm-hmm.
because you have skills to cope.
I definitely agree with that as well. Like when I was saying to my mum, oh, I'd never get to where I was before. You know, that's the old me. You know, and it's important that you kind of just keep adding to that toolbox, and every time that you overcome an experience, or you know, you have that kind of backslide, and then you bloody pick yourself up, and you're like, no, I'm not. I said I'm fighting through this, and you keep picking yourself up. Those are just more things to put behind you and go.
That's right.
I did all that.
Yeah,
I
it
did all
becomes
that.
part
I can
of
do
your
this
skill
again.
set, and
Yeah.
becomes, and then
Little badge of honour.
yeah,
Got them on you, so it's just stuff to refer to help.
and you become a superhero in the end.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
it.
That's where everyone's trying to be a superhero at the end of the day.
Yeah, like it takes a little bit of time and effort, and it's, you know, I think that we can also get a little bit frustrated with the process. That
Of course.
if you're doing everything like you were, you know, you're ticking all the boxes in terms of everything that you're trying to get yourself better. I think that, and, you know, I hope that you'd agree that no matter how many times you fall back down, that if you are confident that you are doing everything possible, that it'll pay off.
That's right. It will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you're putting in the hard effort, like in everything in life, if you're
Yeah.
putting in the effort, you'll get the rewards at the end of the day.
Right.
You get out what you put in. Weet-Bix. So is there, I guess, any positive messages, or you know, any key points that you kind of like to leave our
What I was
viewers
just saying
with?
before actually is a really key point, is that today you might have a problem. If you can get over today's problem, then the next day is going to be a whole lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can look back and go, okay, now I'm a bit stronger. And every day you just get stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and that's mentally, but you've got to just basically always be right on top of it. If you're feeling, you know, a bit low or whatever, talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Get out and go for a walk. Enjoy life. Look up. Don't look down. Look up at the sky, and at the birds, and just enjoy life for what it is.
Yeah, like I saw a ladybird on a blade of grass the other day.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
just
watch
sit there
that.
looking at it. Yeah, and that's what kids do. I think about.
It is. You need to go back to
Yeah.
that childlike
Yeah.
state of like being impressed by everything.
That's probably a good one. Yeah, the other day I was just looking at insects, exactly. Or looking at ants, the way they're organising themselves. That's what kids do. I'm being a kid here. You know? I'm not worrying about all this. You know, I might have 20,000 problems, but if you can just get out of that mindset and just be like a child.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw like a pink galah feather on the ground, and I was like, oh, a pink feather.
Wow.
It's just like, that dog has a fluffy tail. Like I can just snap out of it. So
That's
just
right.
practicing that more for when you are in a bad place, and be like, all right, I'm thinking about this now. I'm gonna do something that matters to me and makes me smile.
That's it.
So, yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think for anyone out there listening, got to be a child.
Yeah. Maybe a kid, and they even
why,
heard.
why so serious?
Yeah.
The Joker.
Yeah.
Why so serious?
He's definitely given us a couple of lessons, the Joker,
Mm.
I think. So I think that's a really good way to kind of phrase your experience.
Yeah.
You know, you have really gone
I've
through
been
the
put
whole
on the
cycle.
spot here, but this is what's just coming out straight away. So
Yeah, that's
this is what I tell anyone: if they're having a bad day today, don't worry, it's okay. Get over it, and we'll get to tomorrow, and you'll be stronger by tomorrow. The next day, every day, just keep moving forward.
yeah. I mean, if you think about the first job you ever had, probably didn't know what you were doing at all. You know, by the end of the first 3 months, 6 months, and it's just that learning process that we all have to go through as human beings. So if you're trying to learn medicine or law, or
Understand your brain.
It's just adding that to your
Understand your way of thinking. You know, that only comes with hindsight. You know, to be able to look back and go, I'm that sort of person.
experience is a big thing. The last thing I just want to touch on at the end, like what I did with Nonie, because it's real, but it's obviously something that we'd love to be able to steer people well away from. But while you were in your really dark time, was there thoughts towards like self-harm or suicide, like in terms of like just not wanting to exist anymore? Is like what I kind of relate to it more as
Right
opposed to suicide.
in the dark, I've had a particular episode episode where, I was thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
But I would never, I never carried through with anything.
Yeah.
But my mind started ticking along that side, that way.
Yeah.
That's really bad.
Yeah. So, for anyone watching, obviously, we've heard from a lived experience speaker and a professional that suicidal thoughts are definitely something that everyone probably goes through when they're suffering from depression.
Yeah.
So, you definitely #not alone, but it is something that you'd want to be able to jump onto as soon as possible. I think that would probably be the biggest red flag.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah.
So if you are really at that point, we'll have all of the links and everything in our description. So please, as soon as you can, get on to looking into what best ways are going to be able to help you. So I just want to thank you so much for coming. Like I said, it is a big thing to be able to actually talk about how you're feeling, but it is possible right here that you can get to a point. You can get to a point where not only can you feel confident in dealing with depression and the tool belt that you've actually been able to assemble, but you may also have tools that are useful for other people that are going through that, and we can kind of keep passing on our knowledge and our skills, and together we can kind of get better, as a group. So thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
So my favourite coping strategies with depression, those that I suggest clients to take home with them, are practicing some mindfulness on a daily basis, doing something that they enjoy, but also I always, with all of my clients, whether it's anxiety or depression, I always suggest that they do some exercise. It really doesn't matter what the exercise is. My chosen exercise is cycling, but if it's just walking around the block, that's the thing that I suggest that all my clients do. Sometimes it is absolutely about connection, so finding some connection with their friends or family, and actually going and doing something with them, trying to do something that they enjoy or that they would usually enjoy, and just trying it and seeing how they feel as a result of doing that thing. But always seeking help from a professional, whether that's their GP who has an understanding about mental health, or if that's through a psychologist. Maybe it's through a mental health social worker or a mental health OT, but definitely through someone who has experience in mental health.
Thanks so much for watching our second episode of #NeverAlone on depression. We will have links in the description bar thing. So we'll have Nonie Carr's psychology clinic details, and different links on where you can actually get help, because this is ideally what this is all about. It's great to talk about it, but ideally we'd like to be able to take some action. So I hope that this has given you some ideas on where you can kind of start your journey, and hope that you are tuning in. So subscribe to our channel and you'll know when we are posting our next episode, which will be on PTSD. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.